When people talk about the late Jurassic, one name always steals the spotlight: Allosaurus. It's the poster child of the Morrison Formation, the king everyone remembers. But hunting in the shadow of that king was a predator just as dangerous, just as strange, and honestly, cooler looking. A dinosaur with a blade for a face, armor plates running down its spine, and a horn nobody can fully explain. This is the story of Ceratosaurus, the carnivore history forgot to give credit to. Discovery, a rushed first impression. Ceratosaurus was pulled from the ground in 1883 at the Garden Park Quarry in Colorado, part of the legendary Morrison Formation, a band of Jurassic rock that stretches across 13 U.S. states. What made this find special wasn't just that it was a new species. It was that the skeleton was almost complete, an incredible rarity for theropod dinosaurs of that era. Paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh named it the following year Ceratosaurus, horned lizard, after the strange spike on its snout. But here's something most documentaries skip. Marsh was in the middle of the brutal Bone Wars rivalry with Edward Drinker Cope at the time, racing to name new species before his competitor could. That rush led to early skeletal reconstructions that got Ceratosaurus's proportions and posture flat out wrong. Mistakes that took decades of new fossil discoveries to finally correct. Not just an American dinosaur. Here's a fact that surprises a lot of people. Ceratosaurus wasn't confined to North America. Fossil material assigned to the genus has also turned up in the Lourinhã Formation of Portugal, on the other side of the Atlantic. During the late Jurassic, the continents were positioned much closer together, and shared coastlines and land bridges allowed dinosaur lineages to spread across what's now open ocean. If that Portuguese material really does belong to Ceratosaurus, it means this predator wasn't just a Colorado local. It was roaming across an entire ancient landmass. Size and the species debate. Ceratosaurus was a mid-sized predator, but mid-sized for the Morrison ecosystem still meant serious muscle. The type species, Ceratosaurus nasicornis, is estimated at around 5.7 meters, nearly 19 feet, with some individuals possibly stretching to 6 meters. Another proposed species, Ceratosaurus dentisulcatus, is represented by an even larger specimen reaching roughly 7 meters, or 23 feet. And weighing close to 980 kilograms, as heavy as a modern American bison. But not everyone agrees these are separate species at all. A number of paleontologists argue that Dentisulcatus and other named forms are simply older, larger growth stages of Ceratosaurus nasicornis, not distinct animals. This debate is still very much alive. And it says a lot about how tricky it is to classify dinosaurs from partial, weathered bone. The skull? A butcher's tool. Where Ceratosaurus really earns its reputation is the skull. Proportionally, it was massive, thick and reinforced at the front for crushing power, but lighter and more flexible toward the back, allowing an enormous gape. That combination is rare. Most predators are built for either raw bite force or a wide mouth, not both. Inside that skull sat around 26 blade-like teeth, each one deep-rooted and finely serrated, more like steak knives than daggers. This tells paleontologists something important. Ceratosaurus wasn't built to crush bone like a tyrannosaur, it was built to slice, tearing away large chunks of flesh in repeated attacks, causing catastrophic blood loss rather than a single killing bite. Death by 1,000 cuts, essentially, delivered by a face built for it. The horn, weapon or billboard. Then there's the horn. A tall, blade-thin nasal horn with 2 smaller brow horns above each eye. The brow horns aren't unique. Allosaurus had similar ridges, but that central nasal horn is Ceratosaurus's signature. In life, it would have been sheathed in keratin, meaning the true horn was probably taller and sharper than the bony core we dig up today. Early researchers assumed this was a weapon, maybe for hunting, maybe for defense. Most paleontologists today lean the other way. The horn was likely too fragile for real combat, and probably functioned mainly as a display structure, a way to signal fitness, maybe settle rivalries during mating season, the dinosaur equivalent of antlers on a stag, rather than a war axe. The overlooked feature, armored skin. Here's a detail that rarely gets airtime. Ceratosaurus is one of the only large theropods known to have had osteoderms, small, bony armor plates embedded in the skin, running in a row down its back. Most predatory dinosaurs relied purely on speed and bite force. Ceratosaurus, uniquely, seems to have had built-in armor plating along its spine. Nobody is entirely sure why. Protection from rival predators during those brutal drought years is one leading theory, but it's a feature that makes this dinosaur look almost like a hybrid between a classic theropod and something out of a crocodile's family tree. Body, limbs, and that controversial tail below the neck, Ceratosaurus followed the standard theropod blueprint: powerful hind legs built for speed, and comparatively small arms, even smaller than similarly sized carnivores like Allosaurus. Some studies suggest the arms retained limited grasping ability, possibly useful for pinning down struggling prey, but they were clearly a secondary tool, not a primary weapon. The legs, by contrast, were the real engine: long, muscular, and adapted for closing distance quickly on fleeing prey. And then there's the tail: deep, flexible, and, according to some researchers, surprisingly crocodile-like in its construction. That observation fed directly into one of the biggest debates in Ceratosaurus research: where Ceratosaurus fits in the family tree. One more thing worth knowing: Ceratosaurus wasn't closely related to Allosaurus or T-Rex at all. It belongs to a much more primitive branch of theropod evolution called Ceratosauria, a lineage that would later give rise to the bizarre horned abelisaurs of the Cretaceous, like Carnotaurus. In many ways, Ceratosaurus is one of the earliest and best preserved windows we have into that entire evolutionary branch, a preview of horned predator design tens of millions of years before Carnotaurus made it famous. Extinction and legacy. Eventually, like every animal in the Morrison Formation, Ceratosaurus disappeared. No single event explains its extinction, but given how fragile this ecosystem already was during drought years, most paleontologists suspect that an extended period of harsh, resource-starved conditions was the final blow for this Jurassic hellhound. Today, Ceratosaurus still shows up in pop culture now and then, most famously in a brief on-screen clash in Jurassic Park 3. But even that moment barely hints at what made this predator special: an armored, blade-toothed, horn-crowned hunter that thrived in one of the most violent ecosystems dinosaurs ever called home. Ceratosaurus never got the spotlight Allosaurus did, but as we've seen, it didn't need to. It carved out its own place in one of the most brutal food chains in prehistory, armor and all. If you want more deep dives into the forgotten predators of the Mesozoic, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which overlooked dinosaur deserves the spotlight next.